Ow! Who are you? Oh, well, I'm you, but better! Been around since the Christmas special, at least. What? There can't be two of us running around. Imagine the anarchy. You know, it's funny you mention that, because it's relevant to today's video. Hey, don't change the subject. If there's more than one of us bumming around, it's gonna confuse the audience. Is that what you want? To confuse the audience? What I want is for you to stop yelling. Jeez, you're making a mountain out of a molehill here. But I'm the Fox assets they know. You're just extra weight. Is this a good time to— No! New year, new me. Well, not really, just new-ish assets. Don't worry, though, there isn't gonna be multiple of me running around or anything. Right? Right. However, I thought a meta joke focusing on multiple of the same character would be prudent for today's subject. Because we're diving into a comic so flippant with its meta that it eventually has multiple of the same character flailing about. So uncaring for traditional storytelling that the author herself is a key character, and so loathful of the fourth wall that it's literally named Ruins of the Fourth Wall. And Scrambled Eggs. And J.I. and Random and Ashes of the Fourth Wall. Okay, look. There's technically a few different comics, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll just be collectively calling it The Ruins of the Fourth Wall. So what is Ruins of the Fourth Wall exactly? Well, it's a Sonic the Hedgehog fan comic released in the early 2000s, focusing mostly on Sonic's longtime nemesis, Dr. Robotnik, referred to as Ivo in the series. And for the sake of keeping with the comic's tradition, I won't be referring to him as Eggman like I normally do, since there's a running gag about the name being an insult. In fact, there's an entire strip about the author having accidentally called him that and it's treated like a huge newsworthy scandal. Yes, the author called him Eggman. Meet Jen Irwin, the author of these comics and secondary main character. Now, I'm sure your Sonic self-insert alarm is blaring right now, but this goes so much further than that. It's not just a character named after her, it is her. And frankly, I gotta give major props to her for having the gusto to just put herself in the comic. I'd never have that kind of confidence. So what would you call this then? Quiet! So, you're probably wondering, why the hell am I talking about this? Fox Tales is about my experiences, right? Well, here's the thing about that. This video is detailing both the comic itself and my experience saving it from the Great Adobe Flash Purge of 2021! A moment of silence for this fallen soldier. You see, the comic pages were all done in Flash, and you'd cycle through panels and comics using buttons. Oh, and to further complicate things, the domain on the original website expired years ago, so I had to use the Wayback Machine to even find these pages. Combine all of that with the fact that there was just so much comic here, and it made for a pretty long and exhausting experience. But then I thought, hey, why not make a video out of it? Yeah, that could be fun, catalog my experiences with saving the comics, and give a quick rundown of each of the sub-series, peppered in with my thoughts and personal histories with them. Before we begin that, though, I want to thank Dr. Mechano for helping to provide some insight on what it was like to watch the comic release in real time and its impact on the fandom at large. He and a few others ran the Eggman Empire, an Eggman fan site that was closely related to Runes and Jen Irwin. I also tried to find Jen herself to ask her some questions if she was willing, but no such luck. As far as I can tell, she's left public internet usage for good. Might be just as well, though. Don't think I'd want to be probed about my old comics either. But let's make this clear, I'm not here to mock Jen Irwin or the comic. To make my opinion as clear as possible, I love Ruins, flaws and all. I'm simply recounting my experiences with it and sharing it with a new audience, or maybe even jogging the memory of a couple of old heads who remember it from back in the day. But enough of the introductions and disclaimers. It's time to leap into one of the biggest projects of my life, and one of the most insane. This is the Ruins of the Fourth Wall series. And so the work began. What would lead to hours and hours of saving files, navigating websites, and reigniting my somewhat dormant Dr. Pepper addiction. That'll make sense later. Ruins is the backbone of which the rest of these comics will be developed upon. And my first thought upon reading the first strip is how well it actually represents Runes and all of its subseries in their entirety. Cartoonish violence against beloved fictional characters, Robotnik being put on a pedestal over the usual protagonists, fourth wall shattering lines and quips, and even the introduction of the running gag about Jen not knowing how to draw machines. The only thing I'd say that doesn't quite line up is that it's traditionally drawn when most of the rest of these comics are digitally drawn, but that aside, I'd argue you couldn't have a better introduction to this comic universe. And from there it snowballs, widely in the way you'd figure. The world is drawn in, characters are colored, Jen tries to draw a machine, Robotnik dies. Yeah, straight up, the main character freaking dies in the opening stretch of the series. He has a heart attack and keels over. I mean, he gets better, of course, but I think this should set a precedent for how loony this comic can get. Oh, even better? Him dying is a storyline. Yeah, he pops up as a ghost, they travel through a gate to the end of time to bring him back for some reason, they lose his body, and it gets found by one of her friends off screen. Yep, they go home and that's it. But honestly, that kind of anticlimax perfectly encapsulates what Ruins is. A comic strip that cares not for plot or story development, it just does whatever it wants until Jen gets bored and they move on to the next thing. Oh sure, there's some lingering character stuff, like Ivo meeting his love interest, a elite-speaking hacker named Arashi, or the world getting sucked into a mass expanse of non-existence. But things would wrap up in the usual chaotic Ruins style every time. Well, except the Arashi thing, but we'll get back to that. It gets to a point where when a storyline actually does try to happen, Jen has to write herself out of the story by making her the willing victim of a kidnapping via the Robotnik from the games, now referred to as Sega Ivo. And even when she's out of action, Jen stops the story because it wasn't funny to her anymore and directly went against her, and I quote, hatred of rules. It's that kind of off-the-wall nonsense that really drew me into Ruins. And apparently the Robotnik fan community agreed, because Ruins made waves. For the time, anyway. Way back when the comic first launched, like around 2002 or 2003, it managed to reach a little site called the Eggman Empire, an old-school hub for the then very small Robotnik fan community to come together, share their work, and just enjoy all things Eggman. According to Dr. Mechano, who as previously stated ran the site, Jen reached out before he even read the comic, and their interactions no doubt encouraged her to submit her comic for the website to link to her website, helping Runes reach a far larger audience than Jen or really anyone could expect. And from there, Runes would blossom and become even more ludicrous. But before we get back into that insanity, I should probably tell you guys how I'm even saving this comic to begin with, since I'm assuming you're curious. Am I using some sort of specialized archival program? Am I downloading the files and converting them? Reverse engineering the code and putting it through some sort of extractor? Using the arcane arts to travel back in time? And I'm using the snipping tool to save the panels. That's about it. Extreme! And now we come to Scrambled Eggs, the comic that I have the least experience with. To clarify, I did read it around the same time as the other comics, but it's the one I went back to the least. There isn't really a reason for it, that's just how things played out, I guess. Anywho, out of the whole series, Scrambled Eggs is the least connected to the others. Oh, sure, Jen Ivo, as he's now called, is there, and Jen herself shows up for a little bit, and the cast from this comic show up in later series, but SE is otherwise disconnected from the other comics for most of its run. Instead, it focuses on Jen Ivo, Advanced Ivo, or Mini Ivo as he's called here, George, an Ivo who is a devout Christian, and Sonic, wearing an Ivo mask, getting all sorts of ridiculous physical comedy, usually somehow related to the characters' egos, or to Dr. Pepper because the entire universe revolves around it. And I mean, hey, I'm not one to argue, it is Nectar of the Gods after all. Well, unless you're Sonic, then you like Mr. Pibb, which gets you murdered by George. Ah, so he's a Fox News watching Christian. Oh, I almost forgot, there's Classic Ivo, who's... wow, she's hot. Yeah, I love webcams. I'm an adult, I'm allowed to think like one. Interesting. There's also this girly Ivo who may or may not be slightly homophobic. I'm honestly not sure. If he is, then I don't think it was on purpose, but I mean, it was the early 2000s. Surprisingly, this comic kind of has a story, which involves Jen Ivo and the others battling Classic Ivo for control of the world, I guess. Okay, look. So it's less of a story, it's more of a consistent theme. Ivo's bicker, violence, and/or further bickering happens, punchline. It does at least allow for more structure, but I don't know, I kind of prefer the less restricted style of ruins. However, there is one thing that this series has on the others. Animation! Yep, there are full-on animated segments and even full animated strips in this series, which is pretty cool, but it made it a real pain in the ass to archive! Oh yes, this was one of the parts I was dreading to preserve the most. As stated, for most of this I was able to just screen cap the panels and move on, but not so much for Scrambled Eggs. To save the animated bits, I had to pull up OBS, set up a source for my web capture, make sure it was cropped correctly, started recording, go through the animation, then stop recording it. Which doesn't sound like a lot of work, but considering OBS was not playing nice with Chrome for some reason, it made me constantly have to reset the source, plus just how many animated segments came up, way more than I remember there being actually, it was a pretty damn big pain in the butt. But trust me when I say, capturing the animated segments wasn't going to be at its most annoying yet. Oh, you'll see. You'll see what I mean. Even putting all of that aside, though, I still think Scrambled Eggs is probably my least favorite of the Ruins series. It's not bad at all, I just don't feel like it plays to the strengths of Ruins. Not at all like... Yep, there's a comic called Random. Very creative. These were 3 super simple strips made later in the life of the series, which can best be summarized by just reading one of them to you. My head hurts. It slipped! Could always be worse. Yes, his insane screaming just made my head hurt more. And that's basically all it is, for all 3 strips. 10 out of 10. 100 out of 100! Watchmen who? Now, this one is special. This is J.I., also called Jen and Ivo, or Jen, Ivo, Magus, and Arashi, or Now, this particular series is special to me because it's the first comic of the series I actually read. Yeah, I leapt right into this comic with absolutely no context for the characters or the style of writing or the universe or whatever. I found it on the Eggman Empire site and dived right in. And I loved it. I have no idea what it was that hooked me as much as it did. Mayhap it was the devil-may-care style of writing. Perhaps the sprite art. Maybe it was because there was very little fan comics focused on Robotnik. But whatever it was, I was hooked. I spent many a lunch period at school just reading it and rereading it, which eventually led to me reading the rest of the Rune series and reading those over and over again. All the other students would be out there socializing or catching up on their homework, but me, reading J.I. again. Like a truly responsible student. It might be a bit early in the video to say this, but J.I. is probably my favorite of the whole Ruins series. It's basically like regular Ruins, but with a teensy bit more structure. The structure being that they answer questions sent in by viewers, ranging from normal ones like,
Yo, Ivo, what would you do with $6 million? Bling bling!
To meaner ones like,
Hey, I just wanted to email I and say your comics suck. I hate them. They're drawn crappy, okay? So please draw them better. Oh yeah, I am
name redacted,
best friend. Ask him about me.
which result in spewing it back at them in an I'm rubber your glue style comeback, which leads to mini Ivo saying, I did mention this was from the early 2000s, right? Of course, as this was focused on answering questions directly about the characters, we got more insight into their personalities and whatnot, which led to somewhat more development for the characters. In particular, it was within the digital pages of J.I. that Ivo and Arashi finally tied the knot, and it's oddly heartwarming. I mean, until Ahias Heaven Shadow ruins the moment, but, you know. So, after all my gushing about how much I enjoy this comic, you may be surprised to find out that I absolutely hated archiving this one! Oh, I thought I had a hard time with Scrambled Eggs. Oh no! Because whereas animated bits in that comic were more a now and then thing, in J.I., nearly 50% of the comic is animated! And it's all 'cause of this little jerk. Magus. Now, within J.I., Magus was already my least favorite character. He just showed up out of nowhere, was a dick to everyone for no reason, and stabbed Ivo in the chest, winning their fight. Don't worry, Ivo liquefies his head later. So, as if to challenge me even further, he's the only character in all of Runes of the Fourth Wall with an idle animation. Yup, this little 2-frame looping animation became the bane of my existence, since it meant I had to both capture footage of it and capture stills of each panel every time it showed up, which, as implied earlier, is a lot. Now, I'm sure you're all thinking,
So, does this video have a point, or...?
and after that thought, you're all thinking, but Fox, why don't you just ignore the animation and just capture panels? It doesn't contribute to the comic at all. To which I say, that's quitter talk! I wanted to get this as close as I could to a perfect translation from Flash, and damn it, I was gonna commit, down to the last stupid detail. I even took screenshots of the comic's directories from different points in time, both from the original upload times to when they needed to be re-uploaded in 2006 when the site went down. Would have liked to have captures of the FreeWeb's website from even earlier, but I couldn't find them, and that made me mad. But I did as much as I could, damn it, even down to the stupid 2-frame animation for a character I hate. I only make good decisions. And now we reach the end. The Fourth Wall is no longer in ruins. It is now simply ashes. Quite literally, as it was burned down by Jen. Honestly, Ashes kinda deserves its own follow-up video because it's so complicated in its execution that if I were to explain it in its entirety, it would at least double the length of this video. Yes, really. See, Ashes isn't just one comic series, it's 7. Yes, 7, referred to as threads. And sure, compared to the other series, they're all pretty short, but together they make for an absolute behemoth by Rune standards, bested only by the original run in terms of its length, resulting in about 68 pages of comics. So, for the sake of brevity and for not losing my mind, I'll summarize each thread super quickly. Thread 1, literally called What the Crap, is the direct fallout of Jen destroying the Fourth Wall. Jen and Ivo spent a good amount of time falling down a pit, and the humor is back to basics. Reminded me of the vast expanse of non-existence part of the original comic. Pretty fun overall. Thread 2, Random Crap. Ever creatively named, this thread spends a good amount of time having Jen hang out with Sega Ivo, and later with Charles, or LeChuck from Monkey Island as a human, who actually becomes her new favorite character after all this time. Yeah, really. Beyond that, there's nothing too special about this one, but I really like how Jen draws Sega's Robotnik here. Very expressive. Oh, also the Lucky Charms leprechaun shows up and gets beaten up by a ninja. Thread 3, Scrambled Crap, renamed to Sprite Crap on page 2. This serves as a sort of continuation of SE and JI. More so the latter if the name changing didn't make it obvious. Because of the shift from Scrambled Eggs to this one is kind of all over the place, and Jen Samus is kind of annoying, but I don't know. Finding out there was more JI-styled content made me smile as a teen, and frankly, it still kind of does. Thread 4, Oh Crap. Yeah, these names are great, aren't they? The shortest of the bunch at only 5 pages, has an awesome idea of Ivo having to take over the comic, and even shifts art medium to pencils to show his different method of drawing. A really cool idea that died way too quick. Thread 5, Hacker's Adventure. This one is debatably the main attraction, focusing on Arashi and Ivo encountering the Monkey Island characters and getting into a sort of hostage situation. Ends before the story can really get anywhere, but seeing actual backgrounds and lighting is pretty cool for Ruins. While still not perfect, if you compare the start of the comic to this one, it shows just how far Jen had become as an artist. I hope she's still drawing today. Combine that with some of the best dialogue in the whole series, and you have what I think is overall the best thread. We gotta find him first. It's not like we can just turn around and see him standing there. Whoa, we really can't. What's going on here? Actual plot development required, maybe? I don't think I like this. Thread 6, Return to Ruin, is exactly what it says on the tin. It's meant to be yet another callback to Ruin's early days. Honestly, it could have been combined with Thread 2, but the little references to other pages is nice, and it has my single favorite line in the whole series in it. The fact that my husband is running through the house half naked while trying to chase down a fox who stole his shower brush doesn't really bother me. The fact that you expect me to try to do something about it, however, does. I mean, honestly, would you? And lastly, Thread 7, New Favorite, New Ruin. This one is honestly kind of depressing. Being the final bit of the comic I read, it's such a shame that it's so short, and by Rune's standards pretty tame. Jen and new favorite Charles just kind of bum around. That's really about it. According to Dr. Mechano, Jen was pretty displeased with the comic by this point, and I think that this thread is where you can feel it the most. I don't know, maybe that's just my Robotnik bias talking. Oh, and by the way, when my boyfriend Blitzio saw this panel, he described it as Hagrid beating up Sans from Undertale, and it sent me into a fit of laughter. So, there's that at least. So, why did I waste all this time talking about a silly Dr. Robotnik webcomic that, honestly, without the nostalgia, probably doesn't hold up too well? Well, for starters, I thought talking about the process of saving it from the end of Flash would make for an interesting video, but also because I wanted to bring some more attention to it. For a comic that, according to Dr. Mechano again, was pretty popular during its time, it's impressive to me that no one really talks about its impact or anything. Like, you look at other works in the Sonic fandom, and people are able to recall them with no issues. Hell, sometimes fans now work on the actual series. But Ruins? Nowhere to be found. And that kind of makes me sad, because Ruins means a lot to me. You might be surprised to find out just how much it influenced me as a teen, actually. I actually made my own knockoff Runes comic with MS Paint and posted it on DeviantArt. It looked like garbage and the writing was terrible, but I did learn a lot making it. And while the premise wasn't the same, it was about Eggman being the main character, sarcastically interacting with other characters, romancing it up with his equally sassy love interest, and wearing a long coat. It was a Ruins knockoff through and through. Oh, also, it happened to share a name with a 70s sitcom that I didn't know existed yet, so there you go. Heck, just for the fun of it, I tried doodling some actual Runes comics while making this video, and you know what? They were a lot of fun to make. It took me back to those lunch periods, posting comics to DeviantArt and reading through these and other webcomics that got my imagination going. Nowadays, I don't really draw comics much anymore despite my best attempts, because I just don't have the time. But this whole thing reminded me of that feeling of just being able to go at it and work on my comics and art as I please. I kind of miss that freedom. Ruins is just as nostalgic to me as anything else I got into around that time, and influenced me just as much. For a silly comic that was already dead by the time I stumbled across it, it was a pretty big deal to me, and I couldn't have just let it get wiped away with Flash. If Jen Irwin somehow sees this, whether by finding it or being shown to her or whatever, I just want to let her know that I'm grateful. Thanks for just making what you wanted, Jen, and inspiring me to make what I wanted. I hope, even if you're not sharing it anymore, that you kept making what you wanted and had fun all the way. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna down this Dr. Pepper and go take a rest, because, oh my god, this one took a while. Take care of yourselves and keep creating. Bye! Holy man, this one took a long time to finish. Like, about 2 months, give or take. I am impressed with myself that I was able to focus long enough to make it, but you know what? This was an important subject to me, even if it may not seem like it from the outside. I really hope that you guys enjoyed it, and if you liked it, please share it around and let people know about it, because not only would I like this video to do well because I put so much time into it, I'd like more people to be aware of the comic. In fact, I have the archive ready to view, and I'm just going to put it in the description for everyone to see. Sorry for the pause there. I just finished recording about 80, technically now with this 81 unique pieces of dialogue. Other than all of that, I guess I just have to say thanks for Dr. Mechano for being so accommodating with my questions. Thanks to my boyfriend Blitzio for voice direction and as well as additional voices. Thanks to Kaze for the fantastic music that you're hearing now. And thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe, share it as well, like, comment, all that usual other social media, YouTube bullcrap nonsense. I love you all, and I can't wait to make more of these that hopefully won't be nearly as long. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go lay down. Ooh.